Welcome everybody to another edition of a BCI-based Cybersecurity Institute webinar. Today we're going to be talking about cyber hygiene, and I think it's a topic that's interesting to everybody and really goes into some, starting information on what everybody should be thinking about in terms of cybersecurity. Um, base BCI is a nonprofit organization. We were founded and started in honor of Rebecca Bass, who was a mentor to me and it gave me a really good perspective of the holistic sort of nature of cybersecurity. There are everything in cybersecurity from policies and papers of, how do you secure things, to the technical aspects, to the invention and the creation side, to the business components. And she interacted with all of those environments across a lot of different industries, including government and academia and enterprises. And she really embodied to me that willingness to bring people together, to bring concepts and ideas together from a lot of different areas. And that is what I want to continue at BCI. And this webinar series is part of that, is to do that. We bring in speakers from government, from all different age groups, from academia. We have a lot of speakers that talk about their research areas, and from vendors and organizations that implement cybersecurity. And I think bringing together those diversities of opinion is one of the ways that we improve cybersecurity and push out education and knowledge and information about what people need to be doing in cybersecurity. And this talk today is very much targeted at that. We're talking about cyber hygiene and what consumers, a really good place to start. But my first question was, why are they different? It was one of the things that, from a perspective in the industry, I kind of understand where they're coming from, and that, maybe they were created at different time periods. But when I first looked at them, it's very surprising that they aren't recommending 6 of the same things. In fact, they're fairly diverse. One of them spends half of their list on managing passwords, and the other one talks a lot more about being careful in what you download. I think they're all good recommendations, and I think that what I really thought was interesting about those being different is could be tied to 3 surprising things I learned in cybersecurity, and they'll tie back to, why those lists are different, and also things that still, I think, intrigue me in the field. So let me start with a quick story. So when I got started in cybersecurity, which was a long time ago now, we have exactly what we have now, which is a user wants to connect to a service. And currently, you'll probably do that through an app or through a website. But essentially, even though the technologies underneath may have changed, the fundamental concept is that I want to access something on the internet. And that's where we started when I started in the field. At the time, most of these services were offered over TCP ports. And so you would have different ports that offered different types of services. FTP was a file transfer protocol. That's what it stands for. SMTP is what we think of as email today. DNS is where you get the name. So if you type in like Diana's ice cream store, it's how it translates that name into an IP address that it can find on the internet. And so all of these services that were common and that were offered were things that we need and things that we still use today. But we created firewalls. This was the first firewalls. There's actually a really interesting book called Firewalls by Cheswick Billiven, and it was this new concept where we can block what is coming into the network. And so we said, oh, this is wonderful. We can close all the ports that we're not using. We can close FTP and email because I don't need those. And we can close X server because it's impossible to secure. And look how much less risk we have because of this. This was like the wonderful invention at the time. Yay, we all cheered. But everybody still needed to access those same services. Everyone still needed to interact and transfer files. And so what happened was, as users realized, well, the way to get through the firewall is I go through port 80, and vendors realized if I want to offer a service to people, I can do it as long as it's through port 80 because that's what the firewall allows. we eventually ended up with this, where all of those old services got pushed through port 80 as a new offering, and we would make basically we make the web more and more complex to handle all the different types of services that we're interested in. Um, and so we ended up back at the same position that we started with. We now have a complex, diverse set of services, and they're being pushed through our network. Um, and so what do? You create better firewalls, you create more in-depth firewalls, you create firewalls that look at more attributes of the connection. And so sometimes you'll hear people say, security comes back around again. What is old and what was existed before can be new again. And this is exactly the type of thing that happens, is that you take those services that you've blocked, that you've stopped, and we didn't, I think the need to implement those services was still out there. And so users just found a way to push them through. And so um, as long as we have that divergence between what people need to do, ATMs. So, and this was quite a while ago, I was doing a review of ATM security, the actual protocol that takes over when you put your ATM debit card into the bank's machine, what happens? And so, when you first start thinking about the problem, you might start thinking about what is the importance, what are the critical components of the system and what needs to be secured. And you might start with, well, the money, right? Where does the money go? How does the money get transferred out of the machine? And so you might focus on, I want to protect the delivery of the money to the end user. But as we delved in, doesn't leave the little pen pad device. That encryption that happens for the PIN is a dual key. So it gets sent to two different people. The people have to show up at the ATM machine and install it at the same time. It's almost like the nuclear submarine where you need two keys to initiate the system. Not only is it two different people, those keys are delivered by two different carriers. So if one company uses or one key goes by FedEx, the other one has to go by DHL or UPS, right? It's a totally separate logistics path. And it's using state-of-the-art encryption, right? They had the best encryption at the time when they developed the protocol. This is amazing. This is the amount of infrastructure and logistics that goes into this it was incredible. And so I said, well, this is great. I can't imagine what they do for the actual controls of what they do for the money. And it turns out they don't do anything. There are no controls on the operating system. The operating system was like a standard Windows machine at the time. And when I sometimes get updates, it doesn't sound like that's changed. There's no protections on the card. So if you see if you've heard of an ATM skimming attack, they'll just put a little card reader in front, and as you insert the card, it reads off all the data from the card. There's no protections on the card to keep people from reading your account number, for example. And then the protections for the commands are also not there. It's all in plain text. All of the controls plain text, and it usually says something like deliver 5 bills from drawer 2. It doesn't even know how much money is involved. It just automatically outputs whatever the command is. And so you think about this and you say, wow, they put so much amount of control into one area and very little in the other. And you realize that that's what's important to the ATM system. The loss of $100 is not going to make a difference either to the consumer, or the bank will just cover it, but the loss of trust in the ATM system where your PIN could be stolen is what is the most critical thing. The most critical thing is to maintain trust in the system and to make sure that they can say your PIN will never be stolen. And so I think that's one of the things that I still find really interesting about cybersecurity is that, and I've encountered this same issue in many of the customers that I've talked with and worked with, is that what you think might be super critical isn't necessarily what they think is critical. And so while we would love to recommend you should use multi-factor authentication on your bank accounts may not be the most important thing, or they may be the most important thing and you should definitely do, and we don't know that answer. I don't use multi-factor authentication for my dog groomer, but if I had a dog that was a national champion, maybe that would be something that I thought was a critical piece of information. And so I think that that difference, that thing that it's different for everybody, is interesting. Okay, last story. Where are you going? So you want to go to Diana's ice cream shop, and you are going to type in the URL dianasicecream.com. If there's somebody malicious on the internet that wants to redirect you, one of the things they can do is they can change the URL to be very close. In a physical, and so they might, replace the I with a 1. In a physical environment, you have lots of clues that you are in a bad neighborhood. The storefront doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it has ice cream. How do we replicate that in a cybersecurity environment? And so, technology to the rescue. We've created a whole list of components that try and replicate that exchange. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm just going to start screen sharing here. All right, so my presentation is on cybersecurity or cyber hygiene and my generation's perspective on it. So a quick overview. First of all, a quick disclaimer before I get into anything. I'm 14. I'm just here to give you an idea of my generation's point of view. I am not an expert, but let's get into it. So first of all, there's a trust factor with my generation. Since we've grown up with the internet, we trust it. Second of all, there's privacy. We don't understand the consequences on our privacy after we use the internet recklessly. And finally, many adults are setting poor examples for their children, or just children in general, and causing them not to understand the intricacies of cyber hygiene. And actually, I'm going to jump on that one first. So, the education system. Many kids will retain a lot of the information that they get from the education system. That's where they learn a majority of what they learn. And so you'd think that the education system would try to set a good example about cyber hygiene. Turns out that's not quite the case. So there are some issues specifically with emails, passwords, and a lot of other vulnerabilities, but I'm just going to dig into, first of all, email issues. So emails will generally contain anything from first name, last name, year of graduation, anything like that, but that's normal for many corporations. The issue is that passwords many times contain the exact same thing, or they have a pattern connecting to the email, which means all you need to know is the pattern to know somebody's email and password. There are also no classes of cyber hygiene or online security at any school that I know of, at least, and that means that the kids are just going to take the example as what they need to be doing, and they're not going to learn that it's really not. And finally, there's some more niche vulnerabilities in the education system that some schools have, but not all. First of all is bring your own device. So many schools will have you bring your own device. And if I bring my device, put it on the school Wi-Fi along with all the other students, then I'm only as safe as the weakest link because I'm connected to the network with everyone else. Another thing is that account information never changes. Many schools won't have you change your account information. So that way it'll just stay as that weak email and password. And finally, many schools will encourage students to connect all their accounts to a single one, which means that if that one weak password account gets cracked, then all your accounts are cracked. An example of this is sign in with Google. So I took a survey of my school last year, and I'm going to give you the responses to one of the questions. What do you know about cybersecurity and hacking? Here's the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. I understand that hacking can be dangerous, so you must be careful with personal information. Yeah, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Nothing much, just to not go on sites that you don't trust. That is great, except the only thing I'd get rid of there is nothing much. That you lose your account and messages get sent out to people outside of your atrocious spelling, that is good. Now, the bad. It's fatal to your computer, and PCs are very good because they help block potential malware. That's good. I really wanted to put you in the good, but you fall into a pitfall that many other people fall into, which is you think antivirus blocks everything, which I will get back into later. And the last two here go hand in hand, that it's bad and that it isn't very nice. Outside of this being a great example of my peers' excellent sense of humor, it is also just, you're not going to want to learn something if you just say, oh, if you sum it up to, oh, it's bad, and leave it there. You're not going to want to learn it. And finally, the ugly. Yes, I've been hacked 2 times. Not only are you not actually technically answering my question, but also you need to work on cyber hygiene if you've been hacked twice. Another thing, mostly everything. If you say you understand everything about a topic, you're not going to want to learn about it, and I'm going to call your bluff. You do not know everything about it. And finally, that it's complicated, which is yet again a terrible growth mindset. You're not going to be able to learn if you just say it's complicated. Now, here's a quick story. Last year, I went to 2 OSINT competitions. OSINT meaning open source intelligence, and it means using free or legal tools to gain information on a person or thing. And both of these competitions were at DEF CON. For those of you who don't know, that is the most attended security conference out there. One of which was a solo teens competition, and the other was an adult team competition. I managed to come away with a win in both, and with some help from a friend of my dad's work, with my mom and my dad helped by taking points away, I managed to come away with a win in both, exactly. So either way, that gives you some background on my competitions. Now let me connect that back to cyber hygiene. I was asked to gather information online about some very cyberware people. This was specifically an ex-NSA cybersecurity employee and a person who does lots of cybersecurity talks. This was for the teens competition, for reference. And there were about 25 or so questions that would generally be answers to security questions, anything from their mother's maiden name to the model of their current car. And I managed to gather more information than those people probably wanted on the internet. And if I can do it for cyber-aware people, specifically an ex-NSA cybersecurity employee, then I can do it for my previously proven to be clueless generation. So some takeaways are that you'll always have an internet footprint, whether you're your average Joe or an NSA employee, but you will be able to lessen it through cyber hygiene. And now let's get on to privacy. Social media has become a huge part of children's lives, and many people will share information thinking that only their friends will see it, which is just not true with how public the internet is, and specifically social media. And if I were to guess as to how many people in my grade use social media, then, oh wait, that was on my survey too. So here's some statistics. Around 75% of people said that they use social media daily, and around 15% are careful about what they post. This creates an obvious issue. If almost everyone's using social media and no one's careful, then you do not have a private environment, or a safe environment for that matter. And here's his hypothetical on the topic of privacy. You have an 8th grader named Joe. He loves to use his Snapchat, and he keeps up his snap streak by posting anything as relevant as his meal daily. Those pictures can have metadata, and for those of you who don't know, metadata is information that comes alongside an image. An example here is this picture of a tram. This was an example from my adult competition, and I had to find who took it, where it was taken, and when it was taken. This wasn't the exact image, but it was very similar. So if you can do all that stuff with metadata, you can even find the operating system that somebody took the picture on. With a quick Google search, any of those could become issues for Joe very, very fast. So, and remember where this started? Joe literally just took a picture of his meal. That's it. Now, let's get on to the trust factor. Google was created in 1998, almost 10 years before I was born. My generation includes people born from 1998 to 2012, and therefore my entire generation grew up with things like Google. And I think we can all agree that if you grow up with something, you'll come to trust it. And the conclusion here is that my generation trusts the internet. So, here's the issue. Outside of the fact that trusting everything we can see can cause misinformation to spread like wildfire, the 2 points that I'm going to touch on are that trust can be abused by people with malicious intent, and complete trust in things like antivirus can cause people to not care about their cyber hygiene. First of all, a prime example of trust being abused is phishing. Phishing abuses the user's trust in their email by sending an email that's from trustedperson@trustedmailsource.com that says, for example, your account has been invalidated. Click this link to fix it. And oftentimes that link is not actually a link to validate your account. It's a link that puts a virus on your computer. So this phishing generally abuses your trust in your email and whoever you think sent that to get a virus on your computer. But before I go on, one thing you can actually do to fix this is you can hover over the sender of the email to see who actually sent it, rather than what they want you to see. Now, here's yet another short story. A friend of mine wants to download a texture pack for one of his favorite games, and he knows that the site he's going to is suspicious. So what does he do? He can, 1, try to find it on another site, 2, abandon the idea entirely, or 3, go to the site anyway and rely on his antivirus. You can probably guess what he did. Moral, my generation tends to trust the antivirus a little bit too much. And you can't do that because antivirus can't catch everything. It does catch some things, which is great, but it's a backup plan. You can't rely on it for literally everything. And this entire time, I've been criticizing cyber hygiene issues. So here are some things you can do to fix it. 1, you can regularly change your passwords. That way, if there's a breach, then your password will change and it doesn't matter. You can use a password manager. So you have one very, very secure password that connects to all your other passwords, so you can keep them secure as well. And another one thing you can do is you can not share passwords across accounts. What I mean by this is you can't have the exact same password on your gaming account and your email. Then that way it makes it really easy to guess your password if you know if somebody knows a single one of your passwords. Another thing is that you need to understand the impact of sharing information. This one specifically targeted at my generation, but that's mainly because my generation uses social media so much. The thing is, if you share all of your information online, anybody can see it, and you don't want that. You're not going to walk up to somebody and say, my social security number is ding, 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 ding. That's not what you do in real life. So the impact, we don't understand that anybody sees the information that you post on social media. And finally, don't click on links in emails or texts. You can just go to the site or person themselves just to check if there actually is an issue in the first place. And finally, to summarize, my generation can't spell cyber hygiene, let alone maintain a safe internet environment with it. So the 3 main reasons for this are that, first of all, adults are setting a poor example in the education system and oftentimes in their parenting. Misunderstanding the amount of privacy or sheer lack thereof in the internet. And finally, we trust the internet, therefore we trust everything, or at least a majority of the stuff on it. Now, before I end off, I would like to say that when I say parenting, I have to exclude my parents, otherwise I would be in big trouble. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. That was a wonderful talk. For those out there, we're going to have some time at the end to ask questions. So if you want to send them in chat, our panelists, we'll try to get to them at the end. Andrea? Oh, you're still on mute. Oh, still on mute. There you go.
Seeing the screen?
No, not yet.
Here we go.
There you go.
Okay, great. My name is Andrea Green Horace, and I actually had an opportunity to work on the development of the first cybersecurity office for the ACA. So I come from actually a healthcare background, and I actually ended up in cyber through working at the IRS and on different working on the IRS on actually IT audits. So I have an interesting perspective on cyber hygiene, but also I wanted to share that I am actually getting ready to graduate on Saturday with a master's in cybersecurity. So I've gone from healthcare as a hospital administrator, working on the ACA and other healthcare organizations, to cyber. It's a fascinating field, and I'm looking forward to questions afterwards. And I thank Diana and Brandon. Your conversation was very helpful and very useful, and I'm excited to hear more. Okay, here we go. As I said, I worked on the Affordable Care Act, and what my job was at that time was to make sure that those states that decided to become health exchanges and take grant money to actually set their own exchanges would be ready to make sure that cyber was built into their platforms. So I thought of this: what can I do for individuals and families that would help that would help them as I helped those organizations that were just starting from the ground up. Very interesting, because what I've learned in terms of business entities, I think could be helpful here. And I'm glad that Diana challenged me, because I've really have never thought about what an individual consumer, but it kind of makes sense. Cybersecurity has a framework, and obviously there are a lot of great resources outside in terms of government and the private sector in terms of getting these organizations to really thinking about knowing and how to manage their risks. But one of the most important questions is really, do we really know what's on our network? Have we really taken an inventory of everything that resides on our network? And sometimes that's simple for some people, but not really. Do we know those things that need to be protected? Obviously something as simple as a TV, as our cell phones, as our iPads, but there are other things that we may not be aware of, or they're coming soon, because at some point we're going to have these smart homes, whether you live in a smart home now. A lot of companies are definitely becoming more digitized, and I heard something of the magnitude of 75% of Fortune 500 companies, they say may go out of business unless they figure out their digital strategy, which means that more Internet of Things are going to be coming to our households. So how are your family and you at risk? What is the risk that you feel? Obviously there's data at risk. Your privacy could be at risk. Maybe your reputation. We'll talk about that a little later. But can you live with that risk? And then obviously, from knowing what assets that you need to protect, do you know what those vulnerabilities are in those technologies? And certainly, if yes, great. If no, does it threaten the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of those assets and other? And then obviously, are those risks high or low? And obviously, who's responsible? Obviously, we know that the vendor's responsible, but the truth is that we are too. So obviously, the vendors have a responsibility to continue to build cybersecurity into their products, which doesn't necessarily happen all the time. The challenge right now for the FDA is to make sure that medical devices have security built in. So are they doing their due diligence to make sure that they're detecting what's going on? And then at the end of the day, do they care? Do they care to correct? And the questions at the end is, who can assist? Part of that is us taking action, and then obviously us doing our due diligence, and then obviously making sure that we spend time, as Brandon says, in terms of caring. So what's on your network? Obviously things are hardwired. We have smart devices. Smart devices. There are sensors and those things. The Internet of Things. And then when you really think about that, we have obviously things like, one of the things that I the stories that I've heard are about the HVAC systems. Certainly there's a story that I'll share about that. The smart refrigerators, smart ovens, smart smoke detectors, smart fire extinguishers, implantable medical devices, and certainly things like bike helmet crash centers. Certainly not necessarily that you're using in your home, but certainly those are things that are important. And when you think about monitors and elder and child care devices where you're monitoring your family members, so how are your family and you are at risk? And certainly there is data in use, transit, and at rest. And when you think about that, when you think about things like the monitors, so certainly those that is data actually in use. We don't think of it that way, but we want to make sure that there's that trust and confidence level. And that necessarily does not happen it's not as hardwired, if I can say that, as people think. But we're concerned in general. And then I can say personal to me, as Diana said, it is personal to the business owner, to the family. Are you concerned about your security, your reputation that could be affected? Is it your identity that can be stolen, or is it a life safety issue? And I'll bring in life safety issue only because, as a former hospital administrator, my research I'm going through my university happens to be on hospitals and ransomware attacks. And as everyone knows, during this COVID pandemic, there were a lot of breaches there were a lot of ransomware attacks in hospitals. So much so till one of the largest organizations, crime organizations, they decided to stand down because it was bad. But once things started to look better, this organization decided that ransomware attacks were really something that they wanted to do to generate more money. So when I say life safety, there are things that there are devices that are implantables. Another quick story about life safety is, I think about Vice President Dick Cheney when he had his wireless heart monitor. For national security reasons, he decided at some point to disconnect that particular device because he was concerned, for his life. If anyone was a watcher of the Homeland series, which was on the Netflix, one of the streaming Netflix companies, Homeland actually walked us through the scenario of the vice president actually being killed through a attack that actually attacked the vice president. So when you think about data sensitivity, it is what data is important to you. What things do you want to keep sensitive and private? I would say you really need to think about what those crown jewels are. So at the top here it says your family crown jewels. So basically, these things are important to me. Obviously when we think about devices and their security, it's an inconvenience. Obviously, if someone breaks in, you can kind of tell when there's a depletion of data, there's a crashing, the battery goes down, there are unexplained charges, and there's unauthorized apps, and for some, they're like, I can live with that. I don't know how they live with it. But I also think about those persons that these devices are critical communication losses for them. Certainly these are your folks who may need them for particular life safety or just to communicate. One of the things that I really loved about working at the IRS, they really had a very strong program for workers who had disabilities. So our technology definitely was geared to make sure that everyone had an equal opportunity to grow. For them, that that critical loss of something as sometimes we just think it's an inconvenience, very important to them. But for me, if I can bring it back to me, obviously some of the things that are crown jewels to me are, obviously when I think about that news story where there was this young child who was actually in her room and she was talking to somebody because of the baby monitor, and the parents can't, but oh my God, so certainly having unauthorized access to your home with your grandchildren or your children sitting in another room and you're somewhere else working, basically folks knowing daily routines and where you're going. That's a data, that's data, that's transmission, that's important to me, and obviously because I'm a former healthcare exec, having folks manipulate data used to treat illness, very, very important. And obviously when I think about the HVAC story, the loss of heat and air, but more importantly, there's a story that there's a scenario where you could be on vacation in Europe and that person knows where you are, and what they can do, they can crank up the heat and tell you at some point, look, if you don't pay this ransom, then your house is going to burn down. Well, you're in Europe. What do? You pay. So you pay the ransomware attack. I suspect, unless it's an organization that the U.S. government has said that no one should really pay attention. And let me correct that. That might be for certain businesses anyway. But no, and then certainly for me, it's stolen credentials, identity, and finance loss. So it's important to really understand what things are really important. Trying to secure everything is potentially it can be, I won't say that it's all feasible, but what we tell companies, what are your crown jewels, what's the data that needs to be protected now, and then that might be those things that are mission essential, not that all data is not important, but the mission essential functions of your home or your business very important. And those social supporting activities and other critical assets that are your crown jewels is something that a family should even think about also. And that one of the questions on my prior screen was, do you know what technologies are used in your home? Right now, and as of December 18th, there were 77 companies that the federal government banned for its own use. Not that companies can't sell them, Walmart might have them, but for the federal government, we are banned from using that. So and then here's a list of those at this point. But that's something that you might want to become educated about, so certainly some of these companies have, from what I understand, fantastic products, but for the federal government, for us, we cannot use them. And when you think about what those products, what vulnerabilities those products have, it's very, very, very important at some point, because this is a new way of thinking. But the vendor in the news, we'll talk about what's happening, or the news will pick up. We know what happened with SolarWinds in terms of some of the Microsoft and other products being exposed during the hack that happened, I believe, sometime early in or late December, beginning of January. But other things that are very important to kind of look at too are Consumer Reports does report there is a national vulnerability database. Our federal government, through, as we said, through the FBI and others. But one of the interesting things that I learned, those companies that are publicly traded companies, when you think about your Microsoft companies, any one of those like Dell, IBM, that have computers and so forth, they have to provide something that are called Form 8K reports, and the Securities Exchange Commission has them either report that quarterly. But it's a good way to say, what technology have I invested in my home, might, what's going on. I mean, and obviously this is not, it's not going to keep anyone excited, but certainly it's a way to kind of become familiar with what's out there. And lastly here, just as we tell some of the companies that were interested in working with the federal government, are your legacy systems, are your legacy hardware, your computers, your routers, are those old? Do they need to be patched? Do you need an upgrade? So certainly, Diana was very, very, very right. I mean, things are changing. We're using more machine learning technologies. We're using artificial intelligence. A lot of our older hardware is not going to stand up. So when you think about having to change out just our phones because things have gotten better, our technology, our baseline technology in our homes might need it too. But once again, it's a combined effort to really understand what the vendors are reporting, what's out in the news. Certainly other sources of information that I have been listed here that would tell you what's going on with your investments. So when you think investments, honestly, you are owner of a product, maybe not the stock, but it's interesting to find out what's going on in those reports too there. And just very, very quickly, the cyber risk management strategy is what we use in terms of talking to other organizations that are interested in contracting. But we've talked about, the frameworks. There's something called defense in depth, which actually Brandon talked about, that layering of different types of security, from the application piece to the network piece. But now we're talking about actually security in depth, which is real-time detection, data science, AI, and machine learning. So the prediction is that a lot of the cybersecurity companies that have been startups are great companies, but those that don't actually incorporate some of the data science, the artificial intelligence, or the machine learning, those are the ones that may not be around very, very long. And then certainly what I didn't put here was quantum computing. Now that's, people talk about quantum computing where the computer eventually knows more than humans. I mean, they say that may never happen, but the point is, as Diana mentioned, some of the algorithms and that real encryption and security, we know that that some of those things that are existing today would be broken by some of these new technologies, and particularly quantum at some point, even though we're years away. But it's still something that families and individuals should probably start looking at and becoming more interested, because it seems really fun when you think about it, but certainly it is a concern for us. So at the end, really assessing, managing, and checking in regularly. So I would say, you want to definitely know what's on, what assets you're protecting on your network. At the end of the day, it could be your neighbor too that's using your network. You never know. But certainly there are a couple of companies like the National Security Alliance that has given us certain advice, and this here really speaks to when you open up your box, you want to change your default password, just simple things like that, early wins. And then obviously having standby experts. We use the Geek Chicks, I'm sorry, the Geek Squad, but having standby. My mother does maintenance on her heating and air conditioning every spring and every summer. And if you can't remember to have someone, just every once in a while, maybe doing a checkup, depending upon the value of your crown jewels. We talked about encryption. And then one of the things that I think is a great reminder for families, there is a National Data Privacy Day that actually happens in January. And then there's a Cybersecurity Awareness Month as well. So these are two good opportunities to take time with schools or even volunteering to go into schools and talk about cybersecurity, because it does give you a guidebook. And if we're not getting it, it might be an opportunity to actually partner with Brandon and make sure that there are parents that have spent time looking at this. And then I would say one of the things I'm kind of fascinated about is the general data protection regulation coming out of the EU. One of the most important things I think is the right to be forgotten. So if you dump a whole lot of data on someone's site, you should be able to forget it. I wanted to also show you this. This is the Electronic Frontier Foundation that has provided a lot of great tools. One is the Privacy Badger, which is a browser extension that stops advertisers from tracking you. And then there's HTTPS everywhere, which checks your email security configuration. And then they have this security education companion, which I thought was pretty neat. But there's a lot on this website, and I just chose certain things. So this is not even a reflection of all the tools that they provided. I just decided to kind of pull out these things as quickly as I could, just to point. And then there's, as I said, the National Security Alliance has a whole program on Data Privacy Day where you can download those documents and really understand and they update them every year. So I find them very helpful. And what you may not be aware of, but our organization, every federal government stops to actually do a cybersecurity awareness month where we bring speakers in, and we really use this information to be very helpful. And if you're starting a business, obviously it'll be very helpful to you there too. This has an actual a quiz that allows you to test whether you're being phished. To take that quiz on that site. And then this is the National Security Alliance that also has different things on how to stay safe during tax time. If you have an online romance, how to spot someone not being truthful, and then obviously protecting yourself. So these are a lot of great tip sheets, and some of these are free online courses, and then some of these are actually videos. So everything is not read here, but once again, this is a snapshot. There's more on that website. I just kind of pulled those things I thought were really interesting, like job search tips. When smart devices need security, when you're shopping for a holiday, but if it's a good opportunity to read and gain more education. And then finally, I didn't want to leave this off, but the Federal Trade Commission has a great website, four steps on what to do if you feel that your data has been exposed. It'll help you figure out what was exposed, how what information was exposed, and I think I repeated there, but has someone used it to commit fraud, and then what to do. And then I pulled out the child identity theft because that's important to me, having a child and making sure that she's remaining safe online. And then here's identitytheft.gov still has, once again, opportunities to go in. Someone used my information for unemployment insurance, which is very relevant now, tax season. I want to report another type of identity theft, but really great, good resources for you to click through. And other resources, the Federal Trade Commission, the Department of Justice, which you don't need to go to right now, but obviously that lets you know that they're on it, and obviously the Social Security Administration, and we're trying to make sure that we lessen the use of those cards. Diane, did you want me to stop there, or did you want me to, can I continue with the cybersecurity opportunities, or do you want me to do that a little later?
Let's go ahead and stop there, and we'll have some time for questions.
Very good, very good.
And we have a couple of questions. The first one's for Brandon. It's about online gaming. So, you know, when you are doing gaming, it's competitive, it's real time, it's very interactive, and you're doing it with your friends, so they know that you're online and may have access. What is the hygiene that you consider there? What do you look for when you're doing that sort of environment?
Well, for one thing that I like to do is like specific apps allow your friends to track what game you're using, or what game you're playing, or what else you're doing at the time, which I just generally turn off. That's, for some people, that's great because you want your friends to know, hey, I'm online, do you want to play, or something like that. But I just think it's too much information out there. Some other things, just in general with gaming, a lot of times I will have, there's a lot of, when you're playing team games, there's a voice chat oftentimes that you can talk with random people on your team, and that's oftentimes not necessarily the most safe environment either. So generally you can have that stuff turned off. Obviously, if you're aware enough, then you know what you're going to say, then you can, so long as you make sure you're not sharing personal information, you can still have that stuff on, but just be careful around that type of stuff.
I think about it in terms of secret listeners, right? There's anytime you have a microphone or a video, you're sharing it with a potential, you know, what you're knowing, and then there's always the potential for it to be broadcast to a wider audience, or to receive information that you're not really anticipating over that channel. So it's a good exercise of trust analysis. There's a second question here that for Andrea. You mentioned that you use a different computer for work and home, but it doesn't necessarily stop all the vulnerabilities. I think that's sort of you know, there's this level of trust and what components are talking to each other that I think that they found interesting. And did you want to expand on that?
Oh, so that's is it that?
Yeah, that.
So yes, so actually, because I am I work for the government, we actually have to use different computers for working home, but you're right, it does not stop. Absolutely does not. Some organizations even allow you to connect your personal devices to your computers at work. So there's, I mean, the whole new opportunity to do remote learning. To do remote learning and remote work is very interesting. I suspect that we probably see more folks with finding that they are having additional vulnerabilities and problems now. I would think that a lot of the companies took the time to pivot to make sure that they could keep their employees secure. I'm not sure how many families had that opportunity too, because it happened so quickly. But you're right. Just because you're using two separate computers doesn't mean you're safe. It really is, hygiene from an overall perspective. You have to think of it as your whole enterprise. I mean, because it is an enterprise. Your home should be governed through certain plans that you have for keeping it safe, and even still, that's not going to keep you safe because there's so much is changing.
Right. I think that I have some friends that I sometimes, talk to them about their home cybersecurity. And one of the things that they had to do was they have a user in the household that downloads a lot of games and has no hygiene whatsoever in terms of what they click on. And so they ended up actually putting a firewall and barriers between that computer and the rest of the home computer. So I think it really does come back to you really have to evaluate what your usage is and what your risks are.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And hopefully it's not your dog.
Yeah. And the frameworks out there. I mean, obviously, as a government employee, we, the NIST standard in terms of the controls, which is probably more than the audience needs to know. But obviously, there's a lot of just mindful or mindless information in terms of what controls are very helpful for certain things. So that's some good reading as far as I was concerned. Maybe it's the person in me that just loves to figure out, how you solve things, but it's out there. But I think getting direction on what to read, and that's most helpful, so you're not spending your entire life reading it and still enjoying family.
Well, I think we're going to end there. I want to thank you both for wonderful presentations. I think they covered a lot of good information, and I'm glad, Andrea, that you put up a lot of links at the end for more information, because I think
Diana, can I just quickly just go straight to the bottom for the cybersecurity scholarships, just to make sure that they're aware.
If you can at least put up the links, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, let me just share the screen again.
And while you bring that up, Brandon, there's another question for you. They're asking about when you sign into a friend's computer and you're using, or you're letting a friend use your computer, what are some of the things that you think that they should consider?
Yeah, for me, I try to avoid that as much as possible, but just in general, I don't like tampering with other people's stuff. But either way, if it is necessary, I would suggest that you just try to just tell them. Well, always be watching. Just watch what they're doing. You don't want them to either on purpose or by accident mess anything up. But either way, you want to have them you want to be watching what they're doing. You don't want them to just have free reign over your computer, stuff like that. I guess the best advice I can have is I wouldn't suggest letting anyone, even if they're friends, go anywhere on your computer. You don't know if they have great cyber hygiene. They might go to some virus-infested website.
And I think that's also true if you have kids that you're trying to put in place parental controls and shelter their experience on the internet. If they go to another computer, you may not have the same type of control. So your controls don't follow you. They follow the computer often case.
Yeah, and also another thing that I just thought of you can do is you can also change your password after that happens. Changing password isn't a big deal. If you just go ahead and change it if you think that they might have seen something, or in any case, just change your password either way.
Andrea, you had these slides?
Oh, just very quick. There's something called a Cyber Core Scholarship for Service, which is coming from the National Science Foundation, but it provides scholarships for anyone interested in pursuing a cybersecurity field, a profession. It provides up to 3 years of support for undergraduate and graduate students. So if you're undergraduate and anyone just starting from high school all the way to persons who want to transition into other careers, it provides $25,000 a year for undergraduate students and $34,000 for graduate students. And what is really wonderful about this, that it does allow for professional allowances at job fairs. At the end of the day, during your summers, they provide you opportunities for internships, and post-graduation, they do require you to actually work for a period in government. But from what I understand is you have an opportunity to have internships not only with the federal government, but with private sector companies. But the demand for cyber professionals, from what I understand, is that right now you can fill 50 football stadiums by 2021. But if anyone is interested, I will leave a link for anyone interested in this. But here are a list of the organizations, participating colleges and universities. The website here is as listed, but you have to make sure that the college of your choice takes the money. They don't give it to you, they give it to the college. Some of these are online, which includes your community colleges all the way through your research institutions and organizations like Carnegie Mellon and others that really are tech schools. But a lot of great opportunities to pursue these degrees if you're interested, or if you know a young person or someone that is transitioning to other careers.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that.
Sure.